Welcome back, everyone. This week, we're going to begin a multi-week unit on intercultural sensitivity. The work that we're going to do over this time, I hope, will help you see your developing skills more clearly and possibly give you deeper perspectives on intercultural issues as they impact us locally, nationally, globally, and personally. At this point in the semester, it is crucial to ask ourselves if we're getting good at what we're studying. Technical programs do this very well, and by now students are usually aware if they're building specific competencies and skills for their career. But what about a course like this? How do we know if we're getting good at intercultural communication? Some of this class is about theory, yes, but some of it really should be about attitude and practice. And that's what we're going to explore in this episode. So what does it mean to become good at intercultural communication? What skills are necessary for crossing cultural boundaries successfully? Take a moment and think about your response. And now, let's take a look at an example from a few years back of a young college student in the United States struggling to understand cultural difference.
Okay, so here at UCLA, it's finals week. So we know that I'm not the most politically correct person, so don't take this offensively. I don't mean it towards any of my friends. I mean it towards random people that I don't even know in the library. So, you guys are not the problem. The problem is these hordes of Asian people that UCLA accepts into our school every single year, which is fine. But if you're going to come to UCLA, then use American manners. So it used to really bug me, but it doesn't bother me anymore, the fact that all the Asian people that live in all the apartments around me, their moms and their brothers and their sisters and their grandmas and their grandpas and their cousins and everybody that they know that they brought along from Asia with them comes here on the weekends to do their laundry, buy their groceries, and cook their food for the week. It's seriously without fail. You will always see old Asian people running around this apartment complex every weekend. That's what they do. They don't teach their kids to fend for themselves. You know what they don't also teach them is their manners, which brings me to my next point. Hi. In America, we do not talk on our cell phones in the library. Where every 5 minutes, I will be, okay, not 5 minutes, say like 15 minutes. I'll be like deep into my studying, into my political science theories and arguments and all that stuff, getting it all down, like typing away furiously, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, when I'm about to like reach an epiphany, over here from somewhere, oh, ching chong ling long ting tong, oh. Are you freaking kidding me? In the middle of finals week. So being the polite, nice American girl that my mama raised me to be, I kind of just gave him what anybody else would do, that kind of like, you know, it's a library, like we're trying to study, thanks. And then it's the same thing 5 minutes later, but it's somebody else, you know. I swear they're going through their whole families, just checking on everybody from the tsunami thing. I mean, I know, okay, that sounds horrible. Like, I feel bad for all the people affected by the tsunami. But if you're going to go call your address book, like, you might as well go outside, because if something is wrong, you might really freak out if you're in the library and everybody's quiet. Like, you seriously should go outside if you're going to do that. So, thanks for listening. That was my rant. Even if you're not Asian, you really shouldn't be on your cell phone in the library, but I've just never seen that happen before. So, thank you for listening, and have a nice day.
It's an ugly, uncomfortable video, isn't it? In 2011, it briefly made national news, and the student later withdrew from the university. Personally, I always hold out hope that people can learn from mistakes, and that they can come to see that their perspectives about cultural difference sometimes may be very limited and distorted. When you thought about the skills involved in intercultural communication, does Alexandra Wallace exhibit any of them in this video? Probably not. She does, however, observe cultural behavior, and that's important. She does notice that the family members of her Asian American classmates are deeply involved in their education. However, it's what she does after the observation that's problematic. She assumes, through her own cultural lens, that that involvement somehow makes them less strong, less self-reliant. as if self-reliance was a primary value in all cultures. It's not, as you know from studying the concept of self. For some cultures, learning to support the family comes first. She uses other types of dehumanizing and territorial language to talk about her Asian American classmates and her own culture's perceived ownership of UCLA. She probably has very little understanding of the important contributions that Asian Americans have made throughout the history of the university. She's angry about a norm being broken in the library, and that at least is understandable. Norms can be broken, even accidentally, across cultural boundaries, and it can be very frustrating for those involved. It is also possible, though, that Alexandra is unconsciously ignoring the students who look like her, who may be talking on the phone in the library, and focusing instead on the students who aren't like her, who are committing the same offense. This is called confirmation bias, and it's a common psychological response to protect ourselves and people like us, while directing our anger at people outside of our cultural circles. But if the Asian American students really are breaking this norm more frequently, a small, thoughtful research project could probably address that concern. Simply put, these kinds of misunderstandings are common. It's not easy to cross cultural boundaries, and it's not easy to expand our ideas about who belongs in our cultural circles. It can be hard to expand our circle of we. This kind of intercultural sensitivity is not an on-off switch. It takes time and reflection and even practice to build these skills. And that leads us directly to our next supplemental reading for the course, The Developmental Model of Intercultural Sensitivity by Milton Bennett. You can find this reading on our D2O course page, and we'll use it on an upcoming assignment. Now is an excellent time to pause the video and download that reading as we preview it together. Milton Bennett, the author, and Janet Bennett are foundational figures in the study of intercultural communication. Much of their work came from their time at the University of Minnesota, and they then went on to found the Summer Institute for Intercultural Communication, SIIC, one of the most immersive diversity training programs for intercultural skills in the world. I had the honor to attend one of these institutes when I was studying for my master's degree, and I was very impressed with everything that I learned in my time there. In the reading, Bennett is going to explain a model of intercultural sensitivity based on the idea of developmental stages, 6 stages to be precise. The stages move from ethnocentric perspectives, in other words, perspectives that see our own culture as central, as the most important, to ethno-relative perspectives, perspectives that place our own cultural ways of life in equal comparison with other cultural ways of life. Bennett is trying to argue that ethnocentric perspectives are common and understandable, particularly when individuals haven't had much experience with people outside of their own cultural context. But he also clarifies that these perspectives are dangerous, and both past political history and current political events can remind us of these dangers. In the ethnocentric stages, people outside of our cultural communities can be denigrated, dehumanized, and abused. However, with more connection and experience, Bennett argues that we can all have more sensitive and more thoughtful interactions. And this leads us to the film Gran Torino. In this award-winning film, Clint Eastwood plays the Korean War veteran Walt Kowalski, a man who's struggling with the demographic and cultural changes of his community. And as you'll see in the beginning of the film, he uses very derogatory and insulting language about his Hmong neighbors, based on his very limited images of their culture and their character. But thanks to the kindness and persistence of Sue, his young Hmong neighbor, Walt begins to connect more deeply with the Hmong community and his neighborhood. Gran Torino is not a perfect film, and it can often be uncomfortable and potentially offensive, but it does an excellent job at demonstrating Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity. I think you'll really appreciate seeing the film as you're studying that model, and I think it holds the promise of addressing some of the intercultural concerns that we see in the United States today. Gran Torino also connects perfectly with an intercultural theory that you might encounter if you study psychology. In the 1950s, psychologist Gordon Allport set out to study the specific mechanisms that could eliminate racism. And what he found is an answer essentially rooted in communication, that people of different cultures need to be able to be in contact with each other. He called his theory the contact hypothesis. And here's a brief overview. What Allport found was that when the intercultural contact met certain criteria, prejudice was very likely to diminish. The first criteria is that members need to see each other as having equal status. Bringing in so-called experts or emphasizing power differences wouldn't be helpful in bringing people together across differences. Next, participants had to have some kind of goal that they would share, even a goal as simple as building a shared safe community. It wasn't enough just to bring them together around a problem, though. There needed to be opportunities for people to cooperate together on the solution as well. Another criteria centered around the need to have a baseline of support for shared norms and expectations of behavior, that there be some authority that they could all agree was fair and could support their interactions together. Aside from working on an event or a problem, there also needed to be time for people to get to know each other personally. Without the chance to learn about each other's lives, friendships were not likely to occur. Through all of this, Allport argued that what was really happening was a reconceptualization of group categories. In other words, people began to look for dimensions of difference that they could share together, without ignoring or forgetting the important dimensions of difference in which they were different. In other words, there may possibly be tensions between Muslims and Christians in a community, for example. However, if those community members can also see themselves as neighbors, and people who share local, regional, or national needs and interests, then it was more likely that the tensions between them would diminish. Allport's theory was widely studied, and other researchers began to find methods of indirect contact that could also reduce prejudice and tension. It turned out that even knowing other people who are interculturally sensitive can help enhance our willingness to connect with people across cultural boundaries. Seeing positive cross-cultural interactions in a television program or movie, for example, can enhance your desire to connect with people across cultural boundaries. Or recently, research on online gaming shows that collaborative play across cultural boundaries can enhance cross-cultural interactions even when the game system is turned off. These are exciting findings because they hold hope that intercultural conflict can be diminished. Even a quick glance at history can remind us of what an important hope that is for all of us. And this finally leads us to our next required reading, A Good Time for the Truth. Please note that I have assigned specific chapters and you're only required to read those chapters, though I welcome you to read the whole book if it interests you. This is not an easy or a pleasant read. If you've lived in Minnesota for some time, it is filled with painful accounts of the experiences of ethnocentrism and discrimination. And yet, I also find this book filled with moments of connection and hope as well. If you've experienced cultural discrimination in Minnesota, this book will help remind you that you're not alone, and that others are speaking out and seeking to create a better future. If you haven't experienced cultural discrimination in Minnesota, the stories are worth reading and reflecting on. Racism is a thoroughly uncomfortable topic to explore. Too often, it's discussed through very limited lenses and frameworks, in ways that are very distorted and unhelpful. Too often, it pushes towards prescriptive responses, and these ignore the complexity that's usually an important part of these issues as well. Personally, I'm not interested in teaching any of you to be politically correct. Considering the depth of complexity to political and cultural issues, I'm not even sure what it means to be correct on many of these issues. However, I firmly believe in intercultural consciousness. I believe that I can teach you to be aware of who you are culturally and how your behavior can impact people across cultural boundaries. I sometimes talk about this in class as PC versus IC, and I think these issues tie deeply into an understanding of racism. Let's go back to a lesson we had a few weeks ago about intercultural images. You may remember that we get our images of people outside our cultural context from three main sources, and we all have images. I could list any cultural group across any dimension of difference, and as you read the list, images about what these people are like will appear in your head. And it is fundamentally important that we question our images and what impact our images have on the way we think about and communicate with others. But racism is a step deeper than this. Yes, it's built off the distorted images that we have, but then we add evaluation and meaning to those images. And then, if we have the power or authority within a culture, we start creating laws and power structures based on those images, and that's when these issues can become even more severely damaging. In 1970, a public school teacher named Jane Elliott decided to teach her young students about this process. She was teaching in a predominantly white community, so she decided to have her students focus on their difference in eye color. Her experiment became a widely seen documentary called The Eye of the Storm. I have a clip of that documentary that will play in just a moment. In this video, you'll have a chance to see how Jane Elliott emphasizes the difference in eye color. She then creates an evaluation of meaning about eye color. And then she creates an unequal power structure based on that evaluation of eye color. And you'll be able to see that it doesn't take the now supposedly superior children long at all to start incorporating and using this abusive system.
God bless America, my home, sweet home. This is a special week. Does anybody know what it is?
National Brotherhood.
National Brotherhood Week. What's brotherhood?
Be kind to your brothers. Be kind.
Okay, be kind to your brothers.
Like you would like to be treated.
Treat everyone the way you would like to be treated. Treat everyone as though he was your brother. And is there anyone in this United States that we do not treat as our brothers?
Yes.
Who?
Yeah.
The black people. Who else?
Indians.
Absolutely, the Indians. And when many people see a black person or a yellow person or a red person, what do they think?
Look at that. Dumb people.
They look at the dumb people. What else do they think sometimes? What kinds of things do they say about black people? In the city, many places in the United States, how are black people treated? How are Indians treated? How are people who are of a different color than we are treated?
They're part of this world. They don't get anything in this world.
Why is that?
Because they're different color.
You think you know how that would feel to be judged by the color of your skin?
Yeah.
Do you think you do? No, I don't think you would know how that felt unless you had been through it, would you? It might be interesting to judge people today by the color of their eyes. Would you like to try this?
Yeah.
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Since I'm the teacher and I have blue eyes, I think maybe the blue-eyed people should be on top the first day.
Up here?
I mean, the blue-eyed people are the better people in this room. Oh, yes, they are. Blue-eyed people are smarter than brown-eyed people.
My dad isn't that stupid.
Is your dad brown-eyed?
Yeah.
One day you came to school and you told us that he kicked you.
He did.
Do you think a blue-eyed father would kick his son?
Yeah. My
dad's blue-eyed. He's never kicked me. Greg's dad is blue-eyed. He's never kicked him. Rex's dad is blue-eyed. He's never kicked him. This is a fact. Blue-eyed people are better than brown-eyed people. Are you brown-eyed or blue-eyed?
Blue.
Why are you shaking your head? Are you sure that you're right? Why? What makes you so sure that you're right?
I don't know.
The blue-eyed people get 5 extra minutes of recess, while the brown-eyed people have to stay in. The brown-eyed people do not get to use the drinking fountain. You'll have to use the paper cups. You brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground because you are not as good as blue-eyed people. Well, the brown-eyed people in this room today are going to wear collars so that we can tell from a distance what color your eyes are. On page 127. 127. Is everyone ready? Everyone but Laurie. Ready, Laurie?
Brown-eyed.
She's a brown-eyed. You'll begin to notice today that we spend a great deal of time waiting for brown-eyed people. The yardstick's gone. Well, okay. I don't see the yardstick, do you?
It's coming over there. Hey, Miss Lane, you better keep that on your desk so if the brown-eyed people get out of hand.
Oh, you think if the brown-eyed people get out of hand, that would be the thing to use? Who goes first to lunch?
Blue-eyed.
The blue-eyed people. No brown-eyed people go back for seconds. Blue-eyed people may go back for seconds. Brown-eyed people do not.
Brown-eyed.
Don't you know?
Oh, they're not smart.
Is that the only reason?
It'll take too much.
It might take too much. Okay, quietly.
And it seemed like when we were down on the bottom, everything bad was happening to us.
The way they treated you, you felt like you didn't even want to try to do anything.
It seemed like Mrs. Elliott was taking our best friends away from us.
What happened at recess? Were two of you boys fighting?
Yeah, Russell and John were.
What happened, John?
Russell called me names and I hit him in the gut.
What did he call you?
Brown eyes.
Did you call him brown eyes?
They always call us that. Craig and all of the boys call us brown eyes. They say, come here, brown eyes. And they were calling us blue eyes. I wasn't. Sandy and Donna were. Yeah.
What's wrong with being called brown eyes?
It means that we're stupider. Well, not that. Oh, that's just the... Yeah.
Is that the reason you hit him, John? Did it help? Did it stop him? Did it make you feel better inside?
Stop Russell.
Make you feel better inside? Did it make you feel better to call him brown eyes? Why do you suppose you call him brown eyes?
Right, because he has brown eyes.
Is that the only reason? He didn't call him brown eyes yesterday and he had brown eyes yesterday. Didn't he?
Because we just started it. Ever since you put those blue things on there. Tease them. Kind of tease them.
Oh, is this teasing?
No. Well, he did it.
Were you doing it for fun, to be funny, or were you doing it to be mean? I don't know. Don't ask me. Did anyone laugh at you when you did it?
I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in a space of 15 minutes.
As you read A Good Time for the Truth, I want you to try as best as you can to avoid two common emotional responses. One is that a number of my students feel attacked when they read it, particularly some of my students in law enforcement. I want you to know how deeply I respect all of my students and the important peacekeeping and life-saving work of those who work in law enforcement. The book is not meant to be taken personally, but rather it's to help us all look at these issues together and more effectively. Some of my students who are from white ethnicities also read this book and feel quite guilty. That's an understandable response, but it doesn't tend to help anyone. My understanding of working with people who've been victims of discrimination is that what they really want is more people to connect with them and treat them decently and fairly. They don't want to be the object of pity or to receive personal confessions of ethnocentrism. All of this stuff is difficult, I know. This is a challenging unit, and I thank you very much for your thoughtful work on these readings, films, and assignments. I believe in the study of intercultural communication because I believe that it holds the promise of greater shared understanding and a greater degree of interaction and cooperation across cultural boundaries. If you read the news, you probably get the sense that things are hopeless, but they aren't at all. Many people are eager to cross boundaries, to forgive, to find connections, and build a strong sense of community together. And I hope that's part of your work ahead in the future as well. As always, thank you for listening, and I'll see you here next time.